More and more I ask myself these days, what the hell happened to fandom? When and why did things get this bad? How did we go from an era where live and let live and don't like, don't read were the maxims of fandom spaces to now? Hey, Sonny, you get the news? Apparently we can't ship Entrapta with anyone anymore because she's child-coded. I'm from the Voltron fandom, as many of you know, and as a person who shipped Keith and Shiro, I was at the forefront of the war between folks who, well, liked the ship, and those who believed we were a plague on society with a vendetta to corrupt and sexually groom all children because we shipped two unrelated adults. Nothing like this kind of Tumblr message to really make you sit back on a rainy Tuesday and say, what? I used to be able to dismiss the harassment with, well, people are crazy. But over the years, this kind of toxicity has ballooned to untold proportions, and I've had to face the fact that plenty of otherwise normal people can and will become serial harassers. For my own sanity, I've endeavored to come up with some theories as to why the fuck that would happen, and I'd like to share some of them with you today. Maybe we can't stop this endless wave of harassment, but at least we can begin to understand where people's unbridled rage comes from. For some reason, there's this idea in fandom that there can only be one correct reading of a source text. I suspect some of this comes down to bad English classes. In a perfect world, teachers would grade students' literary analysis papers on how well they support their claims with evidence from the source text. However, there are teachers out there who base the validity of students' analyses on how well they reflect the author's intentions. In such a way, students are discouraged from embracing new views of a text and are rewarded for seeking out the sole correct interpretation of the source text, as intoned by the author, their teacher, or some esteemed academic. This idea, that there is a wrong and a right way to interpret a text, is deeply flawed. Stories do not exist in a vacuum. Every reader brings a new worldview to the stories they consume. It's all too common for readers to pick up on elements that the author themselves didn't even consider. As long as you can build a solid argument with real textual evidence, guess what? Your interpretation of the text is valid. But if you were to believe the old adage that there's only one right way to look at a text, then of course you're going to feel a sense of competitiveness with anyone whose reading opposes your own. Through that lens, if Sheath is the correct reading, then Clance can't exist, and vice versa. Gotta drag that Sheath fan to protect Clance, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong with a headcanon, and those are valid by nature of being totally subjective. What people fail to realize is that several objectively correct analyses of a text can also exist at one time. Just because your interpretation differs from someone else's doesn't mean one of you is wrong. And that brings us to the point of actually being wrong. If you ever wondered why we Sherlock fans were so determined not to let go of the John Locke ship after the last season aired, to the point that many of us bought into a conspiracy about a secret episode where everything turned out to be gay the whole time, I suspect a lot of that hysteria boiled down to a desperate desire to avoid a reality where we'd been proven wrong. Because in today's fandom climate, wrong means stupid and crazy. It shouldn't be that way. We thought the signs pointed to a great LGBT reveal, and they didn't. So what? We were wrong. We should be able to move on from that. But this constant giant argument over what's wrong and what's right has granted undue significance to those two sides. It makes sense that people would go to such extreme, unsavory ends to protect the correct status of their textual interpretations when the alternative is a public execution. No one wants to be forced into the crazy fan box, and some fans are scared enough of that label to harass people who dare challenge the validity of their analyses.
Ow! You're not listening to me!
That's 'cause you're crazy!
It's common for people to refer to fandom as their escape from the real world, but it's become more than that. It seems to me that for many fans like myself, fandom has become a coping mechanism. It's a safe space. The real world is fucking terrible, so people spend more and more time online in communities where they can find joy and safety through fantasy. The trouble here lies in the fact that fandom doesn't work as a safe space. The internet, as a rule, is not a cozy little side room with beanbag chairs and fairy lights and hot cocoa. It's a godless wasteland full of porn. If you're lucky, you'll find a corner where people always tag their posts so you can avoid seeing things you'd rather not see. But if you go looking for content you don't like, you will find stuff that will upset you.
Nude tane.
This is not suitable for work. Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh! I'm okay.
There's no way to tidy things up to be your perfect meditation room. But people want to tame the wasteland. The longer you stay in a fandom space, the more risk you incur of becoming possessive of the property in question. The fandom stops feeling like a community of houses and more like a single room in your house for you and your friends to relax in, where you know the source material better than anyone else. You, yours, yourself. Understand that in order to maintain its power as a place of refuge, nothing threatening can enter this safe space. And as defined by the previous point, any different readings of a source text can be perceived as a threat because they supposedly undermine your experience of the story you love and care about so much. The people who share your interpretations are right, and that makes them hip, and the people who don't are wrong, and that makes them crazy and stupid. And you have to put those crazy, stupid people in their place, because if more people buy into their interpretation than yours, it makes you wrong, and you're the stupid and crazy one. When you've built your safe space around one ship or headcanon, and other fans ship something else, it doesn't feel like they're partying in the house down the lane with the door closed and the curtains drawn. It feels like, just by existing, they've barged into your house and hung up shipping banners all over the place. Because there can only be one right interpretation, and there can only be one canon ship, and the safe space only has one room. And so it is that house cleaning takes the form of harassment and smear campaigns. A sort of get out of my house battle cry. It's a protection of the self and one's self-care routine. Nothing I don't like can be in my safe space, be that thing a piece of analysis, a ship, or porn. But castle law should not apply to fandom spaces. We're a community, not a single house.
The internet is for porn. The internet is for porn.
What are you doing?
You have until I reach the camera to click away.
All right, let's talk about porn!
While widespread multi-million-dollar franchises that prop up harmful stereotypes and abusive relationships can and do normalize bad behavior over time, there's an argument to be made for appropriately tagged, age-blocked fictional porn. Because you have to understand that the human brain is fucking weird. Today, fandom folks want to believe that good moral people only fantasize about consensual, vanilla sex. The truth is so much messier. Just because a person consumes problematic fictional porn does not mean they want to go outside and commit atrocities. Hell, most people who fantasize about rape picture themselves as the victim. I've heard dead dove fictional porn referred to as a gateway drug to real-life abominable acts. Yet plenty of people read murder mysteries and thrillers, and there's no fandom-wide outcry to ban those on the basis that they're a gateway drug to homicide. And what about video games? There's still no real proof of any correlation between violent games and actual acts of violence. I recommend this video by MatPat for more context on that front. If a AAA video game, something that requires much more engagement from the player than fanfic would from a reader, can't convince the populace to go out and murder people, I'm not going to call well-tagged fics on AO3 a sex offender pipeline. Dead dove porn serves many purposes. For some, problematic fanfic and fan art satisfies that general harmless desire for dark, forbidden fantasy fodder. For goodness sake, some people read dead dove porn to process their own trauma. This is a delicate topic worthy of case-by-case scrutiny, not a monster blanket you get to throw over everyone who's ever dared dig through the seedy underbelly of AO3. And then there's the other popular argument.
Think of the children. Won't somebody please think of the children?
A lot of fandom folks these days are on a moral crusade to child-proof the internet. They want to make sure no child will ever accidentally click on outlandish porn. This endeavor is about as fruitless as trying to stop the Hoover Dam with chicken wire. The internet is not a foam play place for kids. I'm not your child's mother. It's not my job to make sure Timmy doesn't plow through my tags and age restriction signs. Timmy needs to learn how to read and curate his own internet experience. If he can't do that, then he's too young to be online.
There's only one reasonable thing to do.
Become better parents and look after our children in a sensible way.
No.
What matters to this video is the fact that many people take it upon themselves to don the cap of purity policemen and attack any fictional content they deem problematic. They claim this is in service of a greater moral good. But again, the concept of problematic fiction is extremely subjective. No matter where you land on Feminist Sex Wars, the sequel, we can all agree there's an argument to be had here about what constitutes as too far, porn-wise. But as we've discussed already, current fandom culture doesn't take well to maybes. There's always a right and a wrong answer, and the wrong people are always the scum of the earth. So how do you decide who's wrong? With no solid metric to determine the morality of problematic fictional content, no solid line or chart to proclaim a piece of fiction harmless or dangerous, purity police fans turn to the only code they can trust, their own ethics. And a lot of the time, these people's ethics boil down to what does and doesn't make them personally uncomfortable. I probably don't have to tell you that this scenario spells disaster. Today, people base what's morally egregious not on canonical facts or studies, but on what makes them upset. Take Sheath, for example. And yes, I will reference this again because I had to go through it, damn it, and you will feel my frustration. People are going to read Shiro and Keith's relationship as brotherly. If they're very sold on that interpretation, the notion of a Keith and Shiro ship may make them uncomfortable. And uncomfortable, by this emotional metric, means morally wrong. Therefore, it is an act of public service to call out any Sheath shippers and chase them out of your safe space. Feelings over facts, folks. Another example, the Warrior Cats fandom recently went through a scandal dubbed Ballgate, where someone paused a fan animation and discovered a frame or two where a cat's balls were visible. Oh, the horror! A cat drawn with correct anatomy for less than 3 milliseconds of screen time! In any case, some fans were upset. The balls made them uncomfortable, and that meant the animator must be morally wrong. Cue harassment of the animator and a wave of Twitter arguments.
I'm not overreacting!
Here's the harsh truth, lads. Sometimes things that offend you are allowed to exist. These fictional artifacts aren't actually in your safe house. If they're porn and they've been posted correctly, then they're tagged behind an age-blocked door in someone else's basement. There'll even be stuff that squicks you out, but doesn't pose a general threat to the community. Take me, for example. Pompoko makes me really uncomfortable, and you know why? Yep, the balls. So you know what I do? I don't watch this film. If I don't want to see references to Pompoko on my Tumblr dash, I can ask people to tag their posts or block any users who refuse. I'm also repulsed by sex on TV, always have been. It doesn't matter whether it's consensual or not. If there's a sex scene on screen, I'll hide behind a pillow or leave the room. But I'm not going to claim that sex scenes are somehow harmful or dangerous to the masses. The sooner the wider fandom community realizes that each viewer has different squicks and triggers, and that there's no objective way to determine when something fictional becomes dangerous, be that thing cat balls or hardcore fanfic porn, the better off we'll be. Where you draw the line in terms of bad content will always be different from my line or from your mom's or your next door neighbor's. Fandom is a community filled with unique people with different comfort levels. I believe a lot of the upheaval we endure today comes down to each viewer's obligation to wrangle fandom into a shape that suits their personal moral compass. Or, again, their desire to only populate their safe space with things that make them comfortable. Okay, so you'll notice that there's a common thread between all these theories, and that's comfort. People want to be comfortable. Because the world is fucking shit right now. And part of why I think this has gotten so bad. Because, like, the world's always been shit. But it's especially shit right now. And the more shit the world is, I think the more people seek refuge in fandom, in fantasy. And people are totally surrounded by fandom all day, all night. When are you ever away from your phone? You always have access to Discord and Tumblr and Twitter and Netflix and wherever else you watch your favorite show. You have the option to be constantly embedded in that fictional world. So people say, well, don't confuse fiction with reality. That becomes your reality. This is your world. We ask, why do people have such volatile reactions? Because this means everything to them. Really. Like, people like myself, we get into fandom, we pour our whole souls into that space. Our love and our time, ourselves. And so, you know, you see a threat to, you know, there's comfort. You want to preserve that comfort for your safe space, for your ships, however you might read the text. You don't want to see anything that might make you uncomfortable. I talked a lot about porn, but honestly, this can, you know, this can work for anything. You see, like, something you think is a lie, you see someone attacking a creator or some such. That's gonna make you uncomfortable and probably gonna make you think, must be morally wrong. Gotta harpoon them. But really, at the end of the day, I think everything comes down to preservation of comfort, because we have, you know, totally latched ourselves onto these properties. We define ourselves by these properties. And so when someone attacks that property, or attacks your perception of that property, or attacks, so I don't know, floods your dashboard with things that make you feel uncomfortable, that doesn't feel like some peripheral thing. That feels like an attack against yourself. This is you. I'm going to say this as many times as I need to. This is about you now and your safe space. This is your fandom. And people are shitting all over it. So of course you're going to react. Of course you're going to be upset. You are this property. So what can you do? Honestly, other than step back from your computer, who's going to do that? Like, the best thing we can do is try to enforce within ourselves that balance.
You can make a change.
Just can it, won't ya?
That's all you really can do, because this behavior that I've listed up till now has been horribly normalized. The more, so many young kids are coming into these spaces and being taught that this is how you react when things go wrong, or you think that something has gone wrong. So you can't undo, I think, years worth of damage in that regard all at once. I think we can slowly but surely take care of ourselves, and, you know, where we can, maybe do a little bit of damage control, you know, be positive to ourselves and each other. Don't start fights. That's all you can really do. Sorry, world's shit. Fandom spaces are echo chambers, and as long as we keep enforcing, you know, the kind of behavior that, you know, leads to doxing and people telling each other to kill themselves because they perceive any, like, you know, uncomfortable thing as a threat to their person, fuck all, really. I'm gonna lose so many followers for this video, aren't I?